Cablegate revelations that the U.S. essentially hired Ethiopian President Meles Zenawi, I'm probably saying that incorrectly, to invade Somalia in 2006.
Well, I haven't had a chance to really review all 1,300 and some documents. It's pretty much common knowledge that Meles was sent in, and I don't think he was too happy about it, because in history, no Ethiopian regime has ever picked a fight with the Somalis. There was a war between Somalia and Ethiopia in 1977, but that was started by the Somalis. So I don't think any Ethiopian president in his right mind would volunteer to start a war with Somalia. So I think he pretty much was pressured by his masters that pay his salary and his military budget in the United States.
Right. Well, this is what we're seeing with these WikiLeaks revelations, is the U.S. just basically interfering all over the world, extra legally, no due process, no consideration for the law, no consideration for human rights or civil rights, and they're just making a mess wherever they go. But the cables also show Blackwater pitching in to get involved in Somalia. What's the Empire's interest in Somalia? Do they have any oil?
Well, yeah, there's supposed to be a lot of oil and gas, but I think it's more of in general, Americans' foreign policy, particularly in regards to Africa, is what we call crisis management. They want to instigate a crisis and then manage the crisis so that basically they can prevent any strong nationalist government from coming to power that would protect the people's interests, which would force the Western governments to pay a fair share for their natural resources. Basically, they just want to be able to come in and pay off some warlords and rape and loot the resources of the country whenever possible. And I think that's pretty much U.S. policy in Somalia. They know that if a genuine nationalist government comes into power in Somalia, they're going to be pretty hostile to Western interests, especially the United States, because the U.S. has committed a long list of very nasty crimes in Somalia. So they just want to see the warlords in power. And when the Union of Islamic Courts came to power, brought peace to Mogadishu for the first time in 2006, the Americans sent their Ethiopian gendarmes or their policemen on the beat in to destroy that peace. So I don't think the U.S. has any good intentions towards Somalia at all.
But tell me something about Somalia. I heard, you can help me pick through this, whether this is all nonsense or not, but I heard that in Somalia, Coca-Cola has these huge tankers parked outside that are filled with Coke syrup. It's the largest distribution point for Coke syrup, and effectively Coke syrup is the currency of Somalia. Is that crazy, or is that somewhere near accurate?
Well, that's the first I've heard of that. I mean, the Somali pirates, of course, have collected about $500 million and more hijacking ships. And there's been a lot of talk about, they're trying to defend their fishing rights and other things. But the bottom line is, you've got a lot of ships presently hijacked in Somalia, and the pirates there are basically working for the warlords. The pirates capture a ship, they have to pay off the local warlord, they have to pay off the district warlord, they have to pay off the presidential warlord, they have to pay off the Ethiopian military, and they have to, of course, pay off Meles Zenawi in Addis Ababa. And in exchange for that, they get protection. The Ethiopian regime is the U.S. policeman on the beat. They pretty much told the United States and all the Western countries to lay off the Somali pirates because they're paying protection money, and that explains why there hasn't been a single cruise missile come whistling to the doors of any of these pirate lairs after they've collected their loot. That's something that no one in the Western media wants to talk about, is how come there has been zero retaliation against these pirates. Okay. The Americans have bombed.
How much you saying, 500 million, you say?
Over 500 million, yes.
Okay, and so you're positing that essentially the American pirates, the Wall Street banks, are somehow involved in taking a cut of that, and it's easy money for them. And of course, you would never go in there and disrupt easy money. There's a stock exchange that's sprung up around the piracy that's going on. Real estate prices are exploding, so it's like the Hamptons. You got the crooks and the pirates on Wall Street, and the real estate market in the Hamptons goes up. Here in Somalia, you've got pirates out there, 500 million or so looting, and the real estate market around that area goes up, and you've got the same crooks, the same financial terrorists, the overlord financial terrorists, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Warren Buffett, etc., in there taking a cut. Now, what's the mechanism for them to take the cut? I mean, it's not the IMF. They're not the intermediary disruptive terrorist force. It's not the World Bank. What's the intermediary force that does holds the bag man for the Wall Street banks in Somalia?
Well, like the American foreign policy is based on using a local policeman on the beat. And Meles Zenawi is the one that most of the money ends up in his pocket. He has his warlords in Puntland, where most of the pirates come from, and Puntland is located right on the very tip of the Horn of Africa. So there's a payoff that starts with some desperados going out in small open boats and snatching these ships and collecting cash. And they land on the beach, and oftentimes they head right for the nearest Ethiopian military base to make their payoff, to make sure that no one comes in and bombs them in their homes. So in any case, Meles Zenawi is the bag man.
Okay, but who's the banking facility here? Is it the Swiss banks? I heard Tel Aviv now is a huge money laundering operation, kind of picking up the slack from Switzerland. I mean, where's the money laundering, the main money laundering going on for this particular global scam?
Well, Ethiopia is the center of an enormous aid to arms diversion scandal. I mean, something like $6 billion a year, according to the latest reports I've seen, is funneled to the Meles Zenawi regime to keep him in power there and enforce the interests of the IMF and the World Bank in that part of the world. So I think it's pretty much they pay off Meles Zenawi and he does what they want him to, like invade Somalia, invade Eritrea, where I lived 10 years ago. So I mean, I think it's right now Meles Zenawi is carrying out a genocide in the Ogaden, and it's escalating into a full-blown genocide where he's rounding up tens of thousands of ethnic Somalis in the Ethiopian Ogaden and putting them into basically starvation camps. The expression is, if you can't catch the fish, meaning the Ogaden rebels, you drain the lake, and that's what he's doing. He's accelerating the Ogaden genocide, and the purpose of all that is just basically to keep Meles Zenawi in power so he can protect imperial American interests, or Pax Americana, in the Horn of Africa, which is one of the most strategic areas in the world. All the trade between Asia and Europe passes through the Horn of Africa every day. So the Americans have got Meles Zenawi there, protecting the bank's interests, protecting the interests of the financial terrorists, and he's the guy that's got the huge bank accounts in London, and hundreds of millions of dollars, and this has been going on for decades now.
Okay, so that kind of gets toward what I was asking about. So Meles Zenawi is going through London, not Switzerland or Tel Aviv, to launder the money. $6 billion a year in arms deals. Of course, arms dealing being America's huge money laundering operation globally. $1 trillion of tax money collected from those poor schmucks in America every year that goes to the IRS ends up in the Pentagon, and then that ends out buying guns for terrorists around the world, like this fellow Meles Zenawi, who's using billions of dollars in arms deals to launder the money he's stealing vis-a-vis the Somali pirates. I tell you, he should just go public on the New York Stock Exchange. He'd get a better valuation. He could be like the Groupon or the Google of piracy. He could be worth $200 billion instead of just maybe $20 billion. But anyway, let's move on. Blackwater, now known as Z. Let's talk about their involvement a little bit more. Are they visible? Do they wear big branded, the uniforms? Like where is Blackwater Z, the mercenaries for hire? Or are they more, underground?
Well, I don't think even Blackwater wants to go into Somalia. What they've been doing is they've been using Ugandan proxies and Burundian proxies in Mogadishu to try to prop up this puppet regime that they claim is the government of Somalia. And what they've been doing with these Ugandan and Burundian troops who've got the blessing of the United Nations under the African Union is every time the guerrilla fighters attack them successfully in the United States and said, we're going to expand Human Rights Watch into the developing world. We're going to have offices of Human Rights Watch. Basically, as soon as Shashkavili came to power, he started arresting the opposition. He started torturing opposition members. Opposition members started disappearing. And on top of that, Shashkavili had his military attack the South Ossetians, who he claims are his own people, are pretty much non-existent. And yet they're very quiet when it comes to a program that George Soros is funding. So I call them, the human rights mob. They're taking the hitman's money and potential terrorists like George Soros to the tune of $2
human rights mob is a label you've given these groups, and you're saying basically they're taking the money from Soros, who has a vested interest in manipulating these markets.
One killer in Africa, and this has been the biggest breakthrough in history in fighting malaria mortality. And it's not a medicine-based program, it's a public. So this donation is actually a tax write-off. It's going to end up bringing back tens of billions of dollars if Bill Gates has his way back into the pockets of the major international pharmaceutical companies, and it'll pay off to prevent malaria deaths. Instead, they're suppressing knowledge of this.